Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, April the 30th, 2024. Yesterday I talked about Venus in Taurus and I looked at some charts of people who have Venus in this sign. Well, it seemed to be the right thing to do because Venus was going into Taurus and now it is very much in Taurus. Today, Tuesday, Mars moves into Aries, so to be consistent, it seems a good idea to talk about what it means to have Mars in Aries. And so in this video, I will be looking at some people who have got this planet placement, and you can see examples on this thumbnail. For example, Nigel Farage, the British populist politician, or Monica Lewinsky, remember her? Yeah, she's got Mars in Aries, so has Russell Brand, and so has the late Gonzalo Lira, whose perhaps impulsiveness got him into trouble, and he was arrested in Ukraine and died in a Ukrainian prison, or perhaps a prison hospital, I don't know. But yeah, he had Mars in Aries. And I'll be looking at other people who have got Mars in Aries. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is the last day of April, April the 30th, 2024. So here is the position of the planets for Tuesday today on April the 30th at noon, set for New York. And we can see that the moon is just moving into Aquarius. To be precise, in London, the moon moves into Aquarius at, I think, 4:20 in the afternoon. That means that if you're in New York, it moves into Aquarius at around 11:20 in the morning. And if you're in say Los Angeles, it would be 8:20 in the morning. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then moon will move into Aquarius tomorrow on Wednesday. So for many of us, the moon will be in Aquarius, and certainly if you're in the Americas, for most of the day at least, the moon will be moving through this sign. So that's the main thing going on. And as you can see, when the moon moves into Aquarius, it straight away starts making a conjunction to Pluto. So for many of us, it's going to be a day of two halves. So moon in Capricorn, first half of the day, moon in Aquarius, second half of the day. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, as I've already said, moon in Aquarius isn't really your issue right now. That's something that's going to be an issue tomorrow. And with the moon moving from Capricorn to Aquarius, you could say in some respects there isn't a great deal of difference, because Capricorn and Aquarius are signs that are both ruled by Saturn. I know some people disagree with me there, but as far as I'm concerned, the planet Uranus rules nothing. And Capricorn and Aquarius do get their rulership from Saturn. So it's just more Saturn-ruled stuff as we make this sign change. But there is a difference, because Capricorn is a sort of negative feminine sign. Aquarius is a sort of positive masculine sign. So when Saturn moves through Aquarius, when the moon moves through Aquarius, there's more action. The emphasis is less on the material and more on ideas, and we can get our ideas across better. But Aquarius is a fixed sign, and with moon moving into Aquarius, particularly as it starts making a conjunction to Pluto, that does mean that people can be very fixed in terms of their ideas, and they may not want to compromise. And also, it's a reminder that that Pluto is in Aquarius. Now, it does go back into Capricorn briefly at the end of the year, but with the moon conjunct Pluto, when we look around us in terms of the society we're in, we get reminders that perhaps the government is always trying to control our lives. It's trying to control what we do, what we can't do. It's trying to focus on, for example, what we can do with our money, and it's trying to prevent us from having economic freedom. At least that depends on your perspective, doesn't it? But certainly if you're a libertarian, you're really feeling this Pluto in Aquarius. You're really seeing the power of the government, or the government trying to assert its power. And maybe that's something we see with this moon conjunct Pluto. It's just a reminder. It reminds us of this battle that perhaps the people in the government are always having, trying to be in control. When the moon goes past this square of Pluto, it will move on to a square of Sun, but that's really more about something tomorrow. And we also need to think about some of the aspects the moon makes before it leaves Capricorn. So today the moon is trine Jupiter, it's sextile Neptune, and it's sextile Mars, and it makes all of those aspects while it's in Capricorn. So if you're in the Americas, that's more about the beginning of the day. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, those aspects between the moon and Uranus, Neptune, and Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune, and Mars are going to be much more present. So there is a lot going on, and with that moon trine Jupiter, that would be moon in Capricorn trine Jupiter in Taurus, there is a sense in which some of us can be actually quite lucky. We can really get ourselves together from a sort of financial and material perspective. At least we can see what needs to be done. And if we're trying to sort something out on a material level, it may be easier than usual. So yes, so there are a lot of lunar aspects in the lead up to the moon making that final conjunction to Pluto. I say final conjunction to Pluto. I say the conjunction to Pluto is kind of the end of a string of aspects, and having made that trine to Pluto, there's a bit of a gap. Now that moon sextile Mars happens right at the end of Capricorn, and it's a reminder that today Mars changes sign. In fact, it changes sign London time 16:33, 4:33 in the afternoon. So 13 minutes after the moon moves into Aquarius, Mars moves into Aries. And that is a big change. Moon was in Pisces, now it's in Aries. Aries is the cardinal point. And so when Mars moves into Aries, it suddenly becomes very strong, because Mars rules Aries. Furthermore, Mars is going to be on the Aries point. And so this is a time when people are going to be really asserting themselves. We're going to want action. Well, we're going to want to get things done. But we can't ignore the fact that Mars is conjunct Neptune. Mars is going to be making this dissociate conjunction to Neptune. Neptune will be in Pisces, Mars will be in Aries, but still these two planets are going to be very close to one another. And over the next day or two, we're going to find that Mars is going to be the same distance from the Aries point as Neptune is from the Aries point. and it's all going to be close to this fixed star Skeet. And although many of us might be excited about Mars moving into Aries, the fact that we can take action, that we can be assertive, or we might indeed notice that other people are being assertive, it may be action based on a false premise. And it may be action that leads to nowhere. It may be action that is actually worse than useless. And with the Aries point on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, it's already there, by the way, but it's getting stronger over the next day or two, and I will be talking about it again tomorrow. With Aries, the Aries point on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, I mean, let me see what Vita says about Aries on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. He always says something fun about these things. Okay, Aries on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. This is a general idea about the next day or two, what he might be saying. He says general infection, destruction, dissolution. So it's that kind of time, isn't it? Things are to an extent falling apart. And we mustn't forget that Mars, as it moves into Aries, is actually on Skeet. So this might be destruction and dissolution that is water-based. So we need to continue to be careful about water, even though Mars is moving out of the water sign Pisces and moving into Aries. Even then, we've got to be concerned. So be careful with water. This is really important. And there might be news of storm damage, flooding. I think someone kindly pointed out that recently we've had a lot of flooding in East Africa. I think specifically in Kenya, in the run-up to the Mars-Neptune conjunction, which we've just had. In fact, Mars and Neptune are still really close to each other, and so we might see more news of flooding or water disaster or damage connected with ships, bridges. Remember, Black Sea. The Ukrainians are trying to attack Russian targets in the Black Sea. The Russian Navy has to be really careful at the moment. They have to look after that bridge as well, because the Ukrainians, or maybe it's their sponsors in the West, are doing their best to target Russian targets and Russian stuff in the Black Sea. So that's something we need to watch out for. So the news could be about the sea and water and flooding and water damage. And it applies to where you live, your own home. Be careful with plumbing. Don't do anything stupid with plumbing. And, if something doesn't seem right with your plumbing system, don't assume that you can fix it yourself. Okay, if it's really simple, just needs a plunger or something, okay, but anything more than that, be really careful. So that might be how Mars on the Aries point, yes, moving into Aries, but still very close to Neptune. And yes, the Aries point is on the Mars-Neptune conjunction. There is another aspect today, which is Venus is... Where's Venus? You see, Venus is there at 1 degree 28 Taurus, and Venus is making a semi-square to Saturn. So Venus semi-square Saturn, I'm afraid Venus semi-square Saturn is not exactly a bundle of laughs. It's somewhat restrained. Venus is the planet of relationships. If Venus is semi-square Saturn, it may feel that certain relationships may be a little bit stuck at first, may be difficult for some people to express themselves, and it may feel that someone is really holding on tight to something and just doesn't want to let go. Now, Venus is in a good position by sign. In general, it is in Taurus, its own sign, but just when it makes that semi-square to Saturn, it may not feel that it's in a particularly good position. And we should also remember that Venus is a planet that's often connected with money. So with Venus semi-square Saturn, we may be more aware of money than usual. And I suppose on a constructive level, perhaps Venus semi-square Saturn may encourage us to be more careful with money, and we may not want to spend money unnecessarily. So that is an aspect we do need to look out for. Turning to the heliocentric position, so always a good idea to look at what the planets are doing from a heliocentric perspective, putting the Sun in the middle of the solar system where it should be. Not a great deal going on, but a couple of things that perhaps should be pointed out. Firstly, the Earth is starting to make a trine to Saturn. Now that aspect is going to be exact tomorrow, but we're starting to feel it. And I suppose with Earth making a trine to Saturn, it sort of echoes what I was just saying with Venus semi-square Saturn. I think that many of us are going to be more cautious than usual. We're not going to want to take risks, and perhaps we're going to want to try and create structure. We're aware, I suppose, of all the chaos going around us. I've just been talking about Mars conjunct Neptune, Aries on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. Yeah, that is chaotic. We're aware that boundaries can get usurped, that the metaphorical tide is always seeping in, trying to break things down. And with that Earth trine Saturn, that encourages us to try to create structure. It may be difficult, but it's something that can be done. Also, Mercury is trine Venus. I talked about Mercury-Venus heliocentric trine yesterday, but it's still very much in force, and it will be in force for the next few days, because Mercury and Venus are going, they're not going at the same speed, but it takes a bit of time for Mercury to catch up with to get to the exact trine to Venus. And so over the next few days with that heliocentric Mercury trine Venus, we should probably take advantage of it. It's quite creative. It's interesting because geocentrically Mercury can never be trine Venus, but heliocentrically it can happen because they're all free to go around the sun where they like. From a geocentric point of view, of course, Mercury and Venus are always hugging the sun, and so because they're hugging the sun, they can never get very far apart. They certainly can't get 120 degrees apart, but here with the geocentric picture we do have this trine between Mercury and Venus, and I suppose we should try to take advantage of it. So that is the broad picture today, and as usual I'm going to now do my forecasts for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, April the 30th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you continue to be ambitious, and there are certainly a lot of things you want to do and things that you actually can do. And I think there'll be times today when things really start moving. You hadn't expected them to move, but it is happening. And I think you may have actually a growing sense of optimism. And the more you keep working at something, the more you start thinking about why you're doing what you're doing. Now, that is important if you're an Aries. Aries as a sign is not just concerned about money and getting paid for its actions or getting some other material benefit. Aries, is quite an intuitive sign. it often is able to just go beyond the money and the material concerns and ask more important questions like why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And that's what you're going to be thinking about, Aries. And I think it's pretty useful that you've got those kind of thoughts, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your actions into a broader, almost moral view. There is often a morality to Aries, a very spontaneous morality to Aries. Aries just instinctively knows what's right and wrong. And at least I think today you have an instinctive understanding of what's right and wrong. And it's just not enough to be doing something for the sake of it. You've got to be thinking about what is a purpose, what is a reason for it. And I think as the day progresses, that is something that you're going to be focusing on. But we cannot deny, Aries, that the main thing happening today is that Mars, your ruler, is changing sign. Okay, if you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Mars will go into Aries tomorrow, Wednesday, but you get what I mean. It's a big change. And Mars stays in Aries for some time. I wasn't properly prepared there. I should have been able to tell you immediately how long Mars is going to move into Aries for. I should have sorted that out right at the beginning. But Mars is going to be in Aries until about the 8th or 9th of June. So Mars stays in Aries throughout May and into June. And this is a time when you are certainly strong, and you can feel that strengthening right now. If not today, then tomorrow. Suddenly you're able to assert yourself in a new and direct way, which will allow you to accomplish a great deal. Though this sign change from Pisces to Aries does need to be carefully managed. Reason being because Neptune is right at the end of Pisces. You might feel that it's the right thing to do, to take large-scale action with Mars moving into your sign, but because Neptune is there as well, you have to be so careful. Aries can be a very impulsive sign and doesn't want to hang around, doesn't want to think things through. But Neptune indicates some real complications. Things are not as simple as they look. And if you're not careful, hasty actions could cause a great deal of destruction. And with Mars continuing to be conjunct Neptune, be really careful when it comes to anything to do with water, because it's not just Mars conjunct Neptune, it's Mars is conjunct Skeet, this fixed star. And although Skeet is right at the end of Pisces, its influence does spread into the very first arc minutes of Aries. So just because Mars moves into Aries doesn't mean that it's no longer conjunct Skeet. It is conjunct Skeet. So if you're feeling impulsive, you really want to do something, be careful. And, if you're in too much of a hurry to get something done, there might be cause for regret. Finishing up with relationships, and I can't help but notice that Venus is semi-square Saturn. Remember, Venus is the ruler of Libra, your opposite sign. So while it is true that Venus has just gone into Taurus, and Venus is certainly strengthened by going into Taurus, I think I said yesterday that you should respect the people close to you. You should accept that perhaps they're in a stronger position now. Yes, that respect remains very important, but with Venus semi-square Saturn, you might find that partners, other important people in your life, are holding something back, and there might be something bothering them. Now, this is not going to last very long. Venus will make the semi-square to Saturn, and then it will move on. But while it's happening, you might feel that something's wrong, that something is not being spoken, and you have to decide how best to deal with the situation. In certain cases, it may be best to address it, try and find out what's bothering someone. Or you could just wait it out. Venus is not going to be semi-square Saturn forever, and Venus will move away from a semi-square and things will get back to normal. So if you feel that someone is holding something back, don't worry about it too much, because it's just that Venus semi-square Saturn, and it's not going to last very long. Taurus. So I was just talking to Aries, and I said to Aries that Venus is semi-square Saturn, and Venus is your ruler. So if we want to understand what's happening to Taurus, we really have to look at Venus. And yes, Venus is semi-square Saturn. And I think that you might find that a little bit frustrating. With Venus moving into your sign, there are certainly things that you want done. It's exciting that Venus is moving into Taurus because Venus rules Taurus, and you are in a better position than you were a few days ago. But Venus is making this semi-square to Saturn, and this semi-square to Saturn could hold you up a little. You may feel that something is delaying you, is holding you back, and there may be something bothering you. And I think you might be asking questions about some of the people around you, perhaps your friends, colleagues, associates. You may be wondering whether they're really good for you, so that is a possibility. And I think there is a certain reluctance to take the initiative here because you're concerned. And I think you're absolutely right to be concerned. It's a complicated world. I've just been talking about, Mars conjunct Neptune, Mars on skeet, the Aries point on a Mars-Neptune conjunction. Yeah, it's a complicated world, and Taurians have a right to be cautious. But don't take that caution too far. And you also have to understand that if you're concerned about something and if you're holding something back, people are going to notice, and it might have an impact on relationships. And so it might be a good idea, if something is bothering you, if you just tell people about it. You don't have to be dramatic about it at all. It's something passing, this Venus semi-square Saturn. But while this semi-square is around, and I think by tomorrow this semi-square should be breaking up. But while it's around, perhaps be open, be honest. If something's bothering you, I don't think people are going to mind. So that is something that you do need to bear in mind. And don't be in a hurry to take the initiative. I think, Taurus, if you do try to take the initiative, if you try to do something really dramatic today, you may be very disappointed with the results. The faster you try to move, the slower things will become. And in fact, if you really want results, you need to take it slowly, bit by bit. That way you can slowly move towards the achievement of your goals. And that's especially the case if you're in the Americas, because the moon is moving into Aquarius today, and in the Americas, the moon moves into Aquarius in the morning. Okay, depends where you are. If you're in New York, it moves into Aquarius at 11:20 in the morning. If you're in Los Angeles or Portland, Oregon, it moves into Aquarius at 8:20 in the morning. If you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, I don't think you're going to feel that moon in Aquarius quite so much, because it's more about tomorrow or later in the day. I mean, even in London, moon doesn't move into Aquarius until 4:20 in the afternoon. So that moon moving into Aquarius is going to be felt most if you're in the Americas. And with moon moving into Aquarius, you are going to have this focus on yourself and what you can do, because when the moon moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And so that moon conjunct Pluto in Aquarius is in a high profile sector of your chart, and it's going to make you ambitious. Now, if you are in Australia, New Zealand, or perhaps Asia, or you're feeling, even in Western Europe, it seems a bit late in the day for the moon to be moving into Aquarius. Well, don't worry, it's going to move. Moon moves into Aquarius for you late in the evening, or in Australia, it's going to move into Aquarius tomorrow. So don't worry, you're not missing out on anything. But I'm just particularly talking to those of you in the Americas. So if you are in the Americas, you are going to be ambitious, and today you are going to be able, I think, to get things done, provided you do it in a slow, deliberate kind of way. When you focus entirely on your goal. That's moon conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, complete focus. So if you have that focus, then slowly but surely you can really get results. And I think that people are going to take you seriously. They may not like you, but they'll still listen to you. And if you're ready to assert yourself, then yeah, you can get good results. And it may not even be necessary to make a big show of asserting yourself. It may just be enough to have this inner desire to get results. That desire will have an impact. It will be sending a message out, and maybe just people will, if they are not prepared to help you, they'll at least get out of your way. Another thing going on today is that Mars is changing sign. Mars is changing sign. It's moving from Pisces to Aries. That does impact you because Mars rules Scorpio. Scorpio is your opposite sign. You will notice that there are things going on around you, people around you, maybe organizations around you, that are trying to assert themselves. They're trying to get you to do things. And they're doing it in a way that I think you find, I think you find it somewhat annoying. And there's no need to get upset about it, and there's certainly no need to give in to pressure. I think that people who make a lot of noise, who really try to push you into doing something, are not people that should be taken too seriously at the moment. In fact, you really shouldn't listen to them, because it's a day when those that try to take fast initiatives are likely to become unstuck. If you try to get involved in someone else's fast initiatives, someone else's big plans, then you could be compromising yourself. And we mustn't forget that Mars it's not just that it's moving into Aries. It's still conjunct Neptune. It's still on Skeet, this fixed star connected with disaster, particularly shipping disaster. So if someone has a big idea, I wouldn't sign up to it. Maybe in a couple of days' time, but I think you need to see what happens in the short term, because it is a somewhat unstable time. And as far as you're concerned, you should not be expecting fast results. And those who are claiming to be able to get fast results should, I think, be ignored. Gemini. Gemini, you are quite sensitive today, and I think your imagination is actually on really good form. But keep things to the imagination, to keep things to the imaginative realm. So what I mean by that is that yes, you could have some really wonderful ideas, and these wonderful ideas should be cherished. You should think about them, you should work on them, but don't actually take action on them. Because if you act on your ideas today, there might be cause for regret. Because in general, it's a time of high chaos, and if you think an idea really is good, and you're absolutely convinced an idea is good, Gemini, then you might still be wrong. You just might have oversimplified things, and you could then be heading into trouble. So yeah, do keep things at the realm of the idea rather than the action. Still, Mars is starting to move into Aries. So Mars has been in Pisces for some time. Now Mars moves into Aries. And in many respects, I think that is quite a good thing, because with Mars moving through Aries, you're going to be, I think, more sociable. Because from a Gemini perspective, the sign Aries is often about one's social life. And Gemini is actually a very sociable sign. And so with Mars moving through Aries, and it stays in Aries, I think, until, I don't know, something like June the 10th, something like that, there'll be a lot of people to meet, and I think you'll want to put a lot of your energy into being with people. But you've got, I don't know, 6 weeks to worry about it. Right now, while Mars is moving into Aries, while Mars is leaving Pisces, moving into Aries, it might be a good idea if you don't get heavily involved with any group of people. It might be exactly what you want to do. It might seem exciting, but people can lead you astray just over the next day or two, and you might find yourself taken somewhere where you just don't want to be. I mean, when I say taken somewhere, I don't mean physically taken somewhere. I mean just drawn somewhere, tempted to move from one place to another. And you may actually be tempted to lose your concentration. You may, Gemini, be working on something that actually is very important, and as you move towards the end of it, you're almost there, but as you move close to your destination, there are just temptations to just lose concentration at a critical moment. And that would be a shame, Gemini, because if you were to lose concentration, you might lose everything. Just as something you've been working on for some time, you could lose it. So don't be tempted by external forces. They may be offering you something very attractive, but you can't go for it until you have finished what you're doing. And at the same time as all this, the moon is moving into Aquarius. And this is especially important today if you're in the Americas, but even in Western Europe, late afternoon and this evening, the moon will be in Aquarius. With the moon in Aquarius, you are going to be forward thinking, and it's going to be a bit of a relief that the moon is in Aquarius. Don't worry, by the way, if you're in Asia, Australia or New Zealand, the moon goes into Aquarius tomorrow or late this evening, depending exactly whereabouts you are. But Aquarius is an air sign, and there's not much in air signs. I mean, South Node in Libra and Pluto in Aquarius, that's all we've got at the moment. But now the moon is moving into Aquarius. And so from a Gemini perspective, that is a bit of a relief. It means that you can be less intense, less worried. You know, perhaps you've recently had to deal with other people's emotional garbage and you haven't really appreciated it. But with moon moving into Aquarius, you can start getting a broad picture again. You can see the world in all its magnificence, and perhaps you can start rising above your immediate environment. And this is really something you've been feeling, that you've been wanting to do since January, since when Pluto went into Aquarius. But now the moon is also in Aquarius. In fact, the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. It may mean that you can get the first taste of what it's really like to transform your ideas and your perspectives. And one of the great things about being a Gemini is that Geminis are not fixed to any position, whether it's an ideological position, maybe even a religious position or a spiritual position. You are able to change as circumstances change, and also you're able to change as you develop, because you are developing all the time. And this conjunction between the moon and Pluto may just give you new insights, and you may think, well, it's really like this. I didn't realize it was like that. That means I might have to change some of my core beliefs. Yeah, that is possible. And so just be open to that. But very short term, though, today, just remember Mars is changing sign. Mars is in a very difficult position. So whatever you think, whatever you believe, don't act on it, because I don't think it would work out. Cancer. It's one of those annoying days. I mean, it's annoying for me because I'm trying to do these signs for everyone, and I do understand that people watch this video from all over the world, and I get a fair amount of people watching this, for example, from Australia. But I'm talking about today. I say it's April the 30th, 2024, but that kind of depends on your time zone, doesn't it? And so what I say to someone in America may be different to what I say to someone in Australia or New Zealand. So that is a problem. And I'm afraid I cannot do 4 different videos for people on different time zones. And so the moon in particular is a fast moving planet. Okay, I know it's a satellite, and it kind of depends where you are. If you are in the Americas, it's going to be a moon in Aquarius day. If you are going to be in Australia or New Zealand or the Philippines, it's going to be a moon in Capricorn day. If you're in Europe, it's going to be sort of a moon in Capricorn most of the day, but then late afternoon the moon moves into Aquarius. So try to be flexible when you listen to what I'm saying. I know it's not you that has to be flexible, it's me that's supposed to be flexible. But if you're a Cancer in the Americas, then the moon is in Aquarius for most of the day. And when the moon moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And I think for Cancerians in the Americas, it could be quite an intense day because of that conjunction between the moon and Pluto. There are things out there which are complicated, that can't be discussed. At least you don't want to discuss them. And you may take the view that no one is going to understand what you say, because perhaps you can't fully verbalize them to yourself. So you're thinking, well, what is the point in verbalizing it to someone else? But it may be the case, American Cancerians or West European Cancerians late in the day, that in order to understand something, you do actually need to talk about it. And, you might actually find that other people have the same experience or the same confusion as you. And when you hear other people discuss something, you may say, "Oh, okay, well that makes sense," and you might actually feel more comfortable about it. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is in Capricorn all day long, and I think it's going to be quite a good day if you're in Australia or New Zealand or the Philippines, Japan, you know what I mean, because the moon is, it's making a trine to Jupiter. You can feel that. Moon is going to be in Capricorn. Jupiter's in Taurus. Moon trine Jupiter. You can benefit from other people. You'll feel there's a good rapport with people, and I think there's going to be a sense of optimism. You're going to feel that you're on the right track, and provided you don't lose your concentration and you just focus on what's important, particularly material details, that you will be okay. Now, in a broader sense, Mars is moving into Aries. And really, that doesn't really matter about the time zone. Okay, Mars will move into Aries today if you're in America, in the Americas, in Europe. Tomorrow if you're East Asia, Australasia. But that is a big change because Mars stays in Aries until around June the 10th, I think June the 10th. And so Mars moving into Aries from a Cancerian perspective, I would have said that was actually a big deal, because Aries is a cardinal sign, and in the Cancerian chart it's high profile, and it's often connected with one's direction in life, perhaps one's career, one's work, the way one's ego wants to move. And so with Mars moving into Aries, it's a time when Cancerians can really start to focus on their ambitions and to get things done. And you're helped by the fact that Mars is moving towards a conjunction with the North Node. Okay, that conjunction with the North Node is not going to happen for a few weeks, but it's the right place to be. And so if you have been holding off on putting things into action, you've wondered whether you're good enough, whether your ideas are good enough, then over the next week or two, you can start putting theory into practice, but not immediately, because right now, as the Mars moves into Aries, it's still conjunct Neptune, and it's still conjunct this fixed star Skeet. So bit of patience there. Just wait a couple of days until Mars has really sorted itself out. Leo. Leo, you are feeling that something is changing, and I think you are accepting that there are outside forces that can't really be ignored. But just because an outside force is existing and is right there, and is going to have an impact on you, it doesn't mean that you should it doesn't mean that you should be overwhelmed by it. And I think it's a time when, if you are aware of something, it loses its strength. Things are only strong when they're ignored, at least in this situation. So do consider the things that might be holding you back and that might be preventing you from expressing yourselves. So, preventing you from expressing yourself, and just be aware of it. Maybe even confront it in a gentle way. It's not a day for big confrontations, but if you confront something gently, it will be losing its power. And things that are bothering you, as I've just said, should not be ignored. Though one of the annoying things that you might find today is that it just may be a little bit difficult to express yourself. You're not comfortable with the words you're using. Maybe you feel that you're repeating yourself. Oh God, I hope I'm not projecting there. I'm always worried about that when I do these readings for the 12 signs. Am I repeating myself? I mean, I think a bit of repetition is kind of inevitable. So I understand that, Leo, but be careful about going over old ground too much. And don't be too self-conscious in terms of what you're saying. But fundamentally, Leo, I'm not convinced that you're going to be able to get your message across as well as you like. So don't rely today on good communication, because it just might be very difficult to find. And perhaps with the Mars changing sign, Mars moving from Pisces to Aries, the action should not be on a verbal level. Now, you may not feel Mars going into Aries today. You may feel it tomorrow. If you're in East Asia, Australasia, Mars doesn't move into Aries until tomorrow. But we're talking about something that is going on until June the 10th. I think it's June the 10th, something like that. So throughout May into June, Mars will be in Aries. And so looking at this period of time in a broad sense, I think you should be very optimistic about this. After all, Aries is a fire sign. Leo is a fire sign. With Mars moving into Aries, it's a time when you can really expand your horizons. And if you don't know something, you can find out about it. So your knowledge base can be increased. And I don't mean knowledge base in terms of just learning lots of different facts. It's not about facts. Okay, facts are important, but it's actually also about the broad concepts. So try to learn about broad subjects. And I mean, that might seem a bit ambitious to think, well, what can you do in 6 weeks? But in 6 weeks, you can accomplish quite a lot. And by learning about something, you might then realize that you have been, in the past, a little too close-minded. You've taken the view that you've understood all the answers, you knew where you were going, and it was all done and dusted. Now you realize it's not done and dusted. There are areas of knowledge that you haven't fully appreciated, but now you're understanding them. And as a result, you might have to change your ideas about some really quite important subjects. Now, Mars going into Aries for some Leos might relate to travel, and that's something that we always get excited about. We often get excited about, and prospects for travel, prospects for moving to a new country, that might be something that's exciting. That's very exciting. In America, there are all these people. They're really concerned about the environment, and they say they're concerned about the environment, yet they do love traveling. They do love spewing greenhouse gases. They don't seem to care. Maybe they say they can mitigate the problem. They can buy carbon credits. So, I don't want to preach here, but what I'm saying is travel does not necessarily mean that you have to get on a plane. There are a number of ways of traveling. And real travel, you really don't have to. You don't have to move much. In fact, you could argue that I think it was Malcolm Muggeridge. I think he said that traveling narrows the mind. I think it was him. I like that concept of travel narrowing the mind. I think the reason traveling might narrow the mind is because if one goes somewhere for a few weeks, one takes one's prejudices with you. And so you go to a new country, but you're going to a new country with your prejudices, and you see what you want to see. And so you are simply confirmed in your view by going to a new country. And that's not what one expects, but I think in certain cases that is true. And so if you want to expand your horizons, don't necessarily think that travel is going to be the answer. You can't change anything at on a real deep spiritual level just by going to another country. But okay, I'm sorry, I'm preaching there. Yes, travel, it may be important to many Leos, and many Leos may feel they want to go somewhere new, experience a new culture, and really I'm suggesting that over the next 6 weeks, just think about the ways in which you can travel. Think about the many ways, the many ways of traveling, and traveling doesn't necessarily require aeroplanes or even cars. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say on Leo. Again, my apologies for preaching. I didn't mean to. Virgo, you are in a frame of mind where you can see the imperfections around you. There are real imperfections going on. You can see them, and it's quite obvious to you that the world is very far from being perfect, and that might bother you. But you can only focus on yourself. You can't do anything about what is happening out there. And perhaps what you need to do is make your own part of the world as perfect as possible without being obsessed. And yes, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Pluto today. You're really going to feel that if you're an American Virgo. And with that Moon-Pluto conjunction, you're going to want to make things as perfect as possible. And at the same time, you're going to realize that it's probably not possible. And so I think, Virgo, it would be best if you were to be a little more relaxed. Not feel that anything is down to you. And when when you look around your community and things are wrong, things are messed up, it's not your problem. I mean, it is your problem in the sense that you should be perhaps at some stage trying to communicate what's wrong and trying to get people to engage with it. But short term, it's not your problem, and you shouldn't allow it to have an impact on your peace of mind. And maybe, Virgo, you should try to look at things from a broader level and perhaps take advantage of the fact that from a heliocentric point of view, not a geocentric point of view, but from a heliocentric point of view, Mercury, which is your ruler, is making a trine to Venus. And with that Mercury trine Venus, I think if you can really tune into that, that does allow you to get a broader perspective. You can see what you can do, and you can also see what you can't do. And with Mercury still being close to the North Node, you might actually get a sense of what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what you really need to think about, I think. What are you supposed to be doing? Now, you are not going to be supposed to be doing something that is impossible. That's not how the universe works. The universe is not going to give you an impossible task. It's going to give you a task that is manageable. So when you look at the imperfections around you, at whatever level, ask yourself, what can you do and what you should be doing? And I think if you relax, have a moment of quiet contemplation, Virgo, you'll start to understand what you can do, and you'll be able to start to work in the realms of possibility. You'll see, yes, you can do this. It may not be very dramatic, but it is something that you can do. And actually, I think that you will get an opportunity to start to engage your talents, or you may have actually a concept about how to engage your talents, and it starts on a conceptual level, but that doesn't mean that you have to move beyond that concept. Then perhaps over the next day or two, as you think this through, things will start to ground. And remember what I've been talking about with this Mars conjunct Neptune. We've just had that. Mars is still pretty close to Neptune, but over the next day or two, once this Mars-Neptune conjunction starts to break up, as Mars starts to gather strength in Aries, things will become clearer, and Virgo, you will get a sense of what you're supposed to be doing, and also, most importantly, what you're not supposed to be doing. So don't jump to conclusions today about what you should and shouldn't be doing, and don't get worried if you feel that you're living in an imperfect world and somehow these imperfections are your responsibility. They're not your responsibility. But that doesn't mean to say you can't do something about them, but you have to act in terms of what is possible for you. And that goes back to your destiny and what the universe expects you to do. Libra. Well, Libra, I hope you're enjoying Venus moving through Taurus. Venus is, of course, your ruler, and Venus rules Taurus. Venus does rule Taurus, and Venus is strong in Taurus. So, in a broad sense, Libra, you are in a strong position, and you can be confident and comfortable in your feelings. I know you might not feel that your deeper emotions are particularly constructive, but as I explained yesterday, this is an area of growth and development for you. Really don't underestimate your feelings. But today there may be a little bit of an issue because Venus, which is your ruler, is semi-square Saturn. And this semi-square Saturn may feel a bit irksome. It may be like something is holding you up. Perhaps there are just things to do that you don't want to do, and this annoys you. And at the same time, you may be disappointed by your own capacity. You perhaps thought you could do something, and you try and do it, and it's just a lot more difficult than you'd realized, and that may be bothering you. But I think it's helpful just to know that Venus is semi-square Saturn, because this aspect, Venus semi-square Saturn is going to slow you down, but it's temporary. Venus will move away from Saturn. Also, I should point out that in terms of your power and how you assert yourself, you may not have as much impact as you'd like to have. You feel you should be able to assert yourself, that you should be able to make things happen, but it's just hard work. And that's just the way it is. Mars might be moving into Aries, and I'll be coming on to that in a moment in more detail, but Mars might be moving into Aries, but it is still conjunct Neptune, and it's still on Skeet. And so there are a lot of things going on out there that could really slow you down. And if you do try to force the pace, remember that fixed star Skeet can be associated with mishaps and disasters. If you try to force the pace, then you might create a situation which is wholly undesirable. Now, as far as Mars moving into Aries is concerned, okay, it might move into Aries today, it might move into Aries tomorrow, depends on your time zone. If you're in the Americas, it certainly moves into Aries today. And if you're in Western Europe, Mars moves into Aries, and Aries is your opposite sign. Mars will stay in Aries until beginning of June. With Mars moving into Aries, you may have to accept that some people are in a very strong position and moving into a strong position, and they're not in the mood for compromise. So consider Libra. Who are the important people in your life? And how have they been behaving in the past? And how are they starting to behave in the future? Okay, when you're listening to this, probably Mars still is not in Aries, it's still in Pisces. But Mars will move into Aries very soon. And so you might find that certain people are perhaps more assertive than usual. They are stubborn. They don't want to change. And if they do want to change, they might want you to change with them. So other people need to be treated with great caution between now and the beginning of June. And one-to-one relationships, they could be very exciting. I mean, Mars is in Aries. That is certainly exciting, Mars in Aries. Yes, they could be exciting, but you could lose control if you're not careful. So all your one-to-one relationships need to be carefully reviewed, and you have to work out whether they're good for you, and also whether or not you can stand up to the other person. It's going to be difficult to stand up to the other person, though in certain situations, Libra, it may be the case that it is right for you to take someone else's lead. Just because you're following, just because you're doing what you're told, is not necessarily a bad thing. Mars is dignified in Aries. It's in its own sign. Also, Mars is conjunct the North Node, and it's okay. That conjunction will not be exact for a few more weeks, but perhaps with Mars conjunct the North Node, we get the idea of a strong person who knows what they're doing, and they don't do you any harm. In fact, they can do you the world of good. But Libra, it really does depend on the situation, and I do think that Mars moving through Aries, it needs to be, it does need to be treated with a certain amount of caution, and it could have an impact on you. And just remember, there's a lot of stuff in Aries. It's not just Mars in Aries. Mercury is in Aries as well. So getting the balance right in terms of you and other people, Libra, is really going to be very important. Scorpio. Mars is your ruler, and Mars is changing sign. It's moving from Pisces into Aries, and in one sense this is a good thing, because Mars rules Scorpio, Mars also rules Aries, so Mars moving into Aries makes you stronger. But Aries and Scorpio are two signs that don't have an easy relationship with one another. Scorpio and Aries, yes, they're both ruled by Mars, but they have a completely different way of working. Scorpio is a more emotional sign. Aries is a more direct sign. And so with Mars moving into Aries, you're in the first instance, you may feel that things aren't right, that things don't quite fit together, and you're not absolutely sure how to act and how to assert yourself. And I think you need to respect that uncertainty. There may be a temptation, as Mars moves into Aries, to do something spectacular. And the reason you might want to do that something spectacular, or to do something that gets people's attention, is actually because you're feeling uncertain. You're feeling unsure of yourself. So what are you going to do? Oh, well, I know. Let's do something big that gets noticed. Let's establish my authority. That's a good way of dealing with it. I don't think that would be the right thing to do, because Mars is not just moving into Aries, but Mars is conjunct Neptune moving into Aries. Mars is conjunct the fixed star Skeet moving into Aries. So if over the next day or two you're tempted to make some dramatic entrance or to do something big that gets people's attention, I wouldn't. Nice idea, but that kind of initiative is not likely to work, and it could backfire. Backfire not in an explosive way, as you thought, but it could dissolve into nothing. And that is because Mars is conjunct Skeet, and Skeet is, often connected with water damage, water disasters. But I'm not necessarily talking about disaster, but with this sign change, what it should be about is about you taking a slow initiative between now and the beginning of June, where you sort things out. And that's what needs to be done. So think about June the 10th. I think it's June the 10th. Mars moves into Scorpio at 5:35 London time, actually on June the 9th. Let me start again. Mars moves into Taurus on June the 9th at 5:35 p.m. London time. So, till June the 9th. So, think about June the 9th or thereabouts. How would you like things to be on June the 9th? How would you like things to be organised on June the 9th? So if there are things about your life, and maybe even other people's life, that you're not happy about, you've got a deadline there, and work towards it. Okay, it's a flexible deadline. If you haven't done what you need to do by June the 9th, it's not the end of the world. You can just extend the deadline. But try to focus on June the 9th. There's a day for you. While Mars is in Aries, between now and then, that's a time when you can really change things, organise things. If you don't like something, perhaps get rid of it. Slowly, you've got 6 weeks to do it. And so in that way, you can slowly but decisively transform your world, or at least your little part of the world, and make it conform to your vision. So I think that's really what you should be doing. But today, I think you shouldn't be in a hurry to do anything. You know, Mars is in this changeover period. The last arc minutes of Pisces, the first arc minutes of Aries. You're in a state of flux. It's not a good time to be initiating things, and stick to what you feel comfortable with, and don't allow yourself to be confused, because you can't see the whole picture yet. The photograph, of course, people use digital photography at the moment, but in the old days of dark rooms, when you'd have you'd put the you'd put the photographic paper into the tray, and you would slowly, it would take a few seconds or take a few minutes for the picture to develop. The picture is still developing, and so while the picture is still developing, I don't think there's anything you should feel that you are absolutely forced to do. Just wait a couple of days, allow the situation to become clearer. Sagittarius, you are feeling that you can't really reveal everything. I think you kind of take the view that maybe people aren't interested, or that if you were to tell people what was on your mind, that you wouldn't get a particularly favourable reception. I don't know, I think that to a great extent this is about you rather than the environment. For some reason you are reticent, and perhaps not typically Sagittarian. And it may be that, like many people out there, you're impacted by the fact that Mars is still very close to the conjunction of Neptune, and that does make you feel uncertain. Also, you just feel that expressing your emotions just seems inappropriate. And I think that is just something that needs to be respected. And if you are going to communicate today, just perhaps stick to things that are simple. The bigger issues that you can certainly feel can perhaps be held back, not forever, but just for long enough for the overall situation to clarify. Because, as I said, it is a complicated day. Not just for you, Sagittarius. I think it's a complicated day for all of us. But if you can look forward just beyond today, just look forward maybe a few weeks, then there are some exciting things going on. And in particular, Mars is moving into Aries. Mars may move into Aries today, may move into Aries tomorrow, depends on your time zone. If you're in Western Europe, it will move into Aries late afternoon. If you're in the Americas, late morning. If you're in East Asia, Australasia, then Mars will move into Aries tomorrow. But Sagittarius, you are a fire sign, and with Mars moving into Aries, you're going to feel a sense of new life, new excitement, which will take you through until early June. So there's really no hurry to go and do anything or to take advantage of this, because like today, because you've got until early June to sort it out. And I think that with Mars moving through Aries, you're going to be able to put a lot of energy into really discovering yourself and discovering what you are good at. Because there are lots of things you are good at, but maybe you haven't given them a chance to work their way through. But I think that over the next 6 weeks, I think that you can really achieve some amazing things. And I think this is actually what you're supposed to be doing, because in a couple of weeks' time, there is a conjunction between Mars and the North Node in Aries. And that is about an understanding about where you're supposed to be putting your energy. And it's about putting your energy into yourself and into some kind of creative process. Though it needn't be hard work. From a Sagittarian perspective, the Aries is quite a light sign. A sign where you can enjoy yourself, when you can enjoy other people's company, when you can also have fun. And in fact, having fun is going to be really important, Sagittarius. If you're not having fun doing something, then probably you shouldn't be doing it. And I know that sounds rather hedonistic, but enjoyment is crucial. And so perhaps over the next day or two, when you're considering your plans for the next month and more, ask yourself what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. And if something feels like it's a chore and you don't want to be involved with it, then maybe you can leave it for later. When I say later, I mean maybe leave it until, I don't know, last half of June. Because shorter term, between now and, say, June the 9th, it's just important that you are enjoying yourself, and you should be really concentrating on those parts of your life that, that give you satisfaction and that give you pleasure. Again, not in a hedonistic and mindless sense, because if things are working well, the things you enjoy, the things that are fun, are going to be the things that are going to be most productive. Though perhaps if there's something you have to do over the next 6 weeks, then make sure that you do it in such a way that you're enjoying it. And perhaps if something had been boring in the past and had felt like a chore in the past, maybe you can transform your perspective on it. And you've got to see it as being something, I won't say that amuses you, but something that feels right and feels enjoyable and feels just to be a fundamental part of who you are, and most importantly, a fundamental part of your creative self. Capricorn, you have to make sure today that you don't have a negative impact on other people. You could. It just may be that you are quite self-disciplined, and that's great. You know what's important, but if you labour that point too much, especially in company, you could have a negative impact, and that is especially the case if you're in a position of authority or power. People are looking up to you. Maybe you have a position of leadership. In those kinds of situations, you have to be really careful how you behave, because there is a danger that you bring people down. You're overly judgmental, and people just may feel they can't express themselves when they're around you. I mean, it's a short-term situation, but it is a real possibility. So, Capricorn, really consider how you are occurring to other people. And that means you have to be very self-aware and look at their reaction and look at your reaction, because you're perhaps being a little judgmental, and perhaps people are ever so slightly afraid of you. They're kind of worried what you're going to say, and you have to consider what the situation is. Now, in a positive sense, if you feel that people are doing something wrong and need to be brought to task, then you'll make a powerful impression. You will be able to establish your authority, but you do have to consider the price. And so you shouldn't be establishing your authority just for the sake of it. And you should be very careful about judging people. And while this is going on, Mars is changing sign. Mars is moving from Pisces to Aries. Now, this movement from Pisces to Aries could have an impact on where you live, your family. If you, for example, you're working with real estate, then Mars moving into Aries could be important from a Capricorn perspective. And this is where a lot of your energy is going to be going, in things connected with family and perhaps real estate, if that's your business or if that's your concern, your domestic environment, your home, where you live. And this will continue until the beginning of June. I think June the 9th is when Mars moves out of Aries into Taurus. And whether or not this is a good thing kind of depends on the situation. You can do a lot of useful stuff around the home, and in terms of dealing with your family. And again, if you're involved in real estate, that would take up a lot of your energy, and it could be very constructive. But it is Mars. Mars can take things too far. Mars can get annoyed and can get angry. And so if things aren't moving fast enough, perhaps if your family aren't responding in the right way to you, you could get annoyed. So you do have to get the balance right. You can cover a lot of ground at home. You can assert yourself at home. You can do people a lot of good if they're members of your family. But if you don't get the balance right, you could come over as being too domineering, too assertive. And so that is really something to think about. Another thing about your home is consider annoyances and things that could become annoyances. So, for example, don't invite people into your home unless you know what you're doing. I'm not talking about anything dangerous or scary. It's just that if you don't know someone and you bring someone into your home, or maybe you're renting, I don't know, maybe you're in America, half the population seem to be renters. Half the population seem to own about 5 rentals. I don't know. It all depends, doesn't it? But if you've got renters, for example, you need to watch out. Who are you renting to? Consider their behaviour. Or if you're a renter, consider your landlord. Your landlord could be a real problem over the next 6 weeks. So try to think ahead on that score, and it may be that real estate is not of interest to you, and it's not a concern. But what I'm saying is, whatever is at the fundamentals of your life, family, home, the domestic situation, real estate, whatever it is, fixed assets, just over the next 6 weeks, could require a lot of your energy. And I think it does require also a certain amount of vigilance. Aquarius. The moon is moving into Aquarius, and it may happen today, may happen tomorrow, depending on where you are. But I think it's a bit of a relief, really, moon moving into Aquarius, because, while the moon has been in Capricorn, you haven't felt 100% over the last couple of days. You may have felt that you were perhaps holding something back, that you couldn't entirely be yourself, and that might have bothered you. But anyway, moon is moving into Aquarius. Okay, it might be tomorrow if you're in Asia, Australia or New Zealand, but if you're in the Americas, by the late morning, the moon will certainly be in Aquarius, and you're going to be feeling that you have in some way arrived, that things are now happening, and that you are now in control. Though when the moon moves into Aquarius, it does make a conjunction to Pluto, and this moon-Pluto conjunction, it may make you feel that you do have to hold your ground, and that you do have to be assertive, that you have to, I suppose, hold fast onto what you believe, and you may decide that if you make any compromise, it's a threat. So be stubborn regardless. That can be moon conjunct Pluto. And I don't know if that's a good thing. If you're stubborn and you're wrong, that could be a real problem. Also, you might be terrified of revealing things. Aquarius is a fixed sign. You're holding on to things, moon conjunct Pluto, and you feel if you were to reveal something, if you were to tell someone how you really felt, what would happen? I think you could take things too far, because if you are so concerned about what people think and what you are revealing, you might end up revealing not just nothing, but you might be shutting yourself down as a social being, and that is not something you want to do, especially as today Venus is semi-square Saturn. Venus is the planet of relationships, and Saturn is your ruler. And so Venus semi-square Saturn can be about you putting people off. And I said something similar to Capricorn, because Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. I must emphasize, in my view, Uranus does not, Uranus doesn't rule anything. And it certainly doesn't rule Aquarius. Saturn rules Aquarius. So Saturn semi-square Venus can really slow things down as far as you and other people are concerned. And you might be a difficult person to have around. And you may be no fun. And when people are around you, they may just feel that they can't really express themselves. And you have to ask how you deal with that. Maybe you just accept the situation. I think that in many respects, at the moment, Aquarians are probably not feeling particularly sociable. So perhaps you're not going to have people around you, or maybe you're talking to them over the phone, but in that case, it's not so important. But if you are in a highly sociable position, or you've got members of your family around you, you do have to consider how you're coming across, because with that Saturn semi-square Venus, I think it would just be so easy to close people down. I said the same thing to Capricorn. So try to be a little more moderate, though I suppose you have to consider where is it that people need criticism. It may be there is a place for genuine criticism, and if anything, I would have said that might relate to money. There are a couple of people who are maybe not being clever with money. Maybe they're members of your family. They're just not being clever. And maybe you need to suggest that they need to change their strategy, or that they need to be more careful. So perhaps you should consider your family and how they're dealing with money, and how the whole household income is going with this Venus semi-square Saturn. And if something is wrong, yes, I think it may be a situation where you really do have to say something. Pisces. Mars is moving out of your sign. So with Mars moving out of your sign, in some ways that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, you've had Mars in Pisces, I don't know, the last 6 weeks or so, and it's finally out. And in some respects, that does make you an easier person to deal with. I think there have been times where you have been a bit annoyed, maybe a little bit aggressive, and you've been perhaps over keen to assert yourself. And with Mars moving out of Pisces, I think you can be a little more relaxed. And I think also you might be less accident prone. And so I think I do think that is a good thing, though bear in mind that today, as Mars moves out of Pisces, it does make a conjunction to Neptune. I talked about that conjunction. That conjunction to Neptune was around yesterday, but it's still around. It's still around. It's still affecting that last degree of Pisces, where you've got Skeet, that fixed star. So Pisces, today, do continue to be careful. Don't do anything stupid. You still might be a little bit accident prone. Anything to do with water, you need to be really careful with. Boat trips should be avoided, and at the same time, heavily emotional situations should be avoided. Situations where there is a lot of emotion flying around, you're not going to be comfortable. Now that's strange, because Pisces is a water sign. It's emotional. It has a good understanding of its own emotions. But today, no. I think that you're not really going to be able to express your feelings in the way you're accustomed to. Especially, when dealing with people on a one-to-one level, it just won't feel right. Maybe you'll be just preoccupied with something else, but as soon as emotions start getting expressed, other people expressing their emotions, it's like the barriers will come down, maybe the steel shatters, and you might not make a very good impression because it may be very obvious that the barriers are coming down. So perhaps you should be ready for that. As soon as things start getting emotional, and you'll know because you're a Pisces, you have emotional sensitivity there. But as soon as things start getting emotional, then you can start to back off, and you can leave it for another day. The problem is, to be technical about it, there is a well, if I want to be technical about it, well, for one thing, there is a semi-square between Venus and Saturn, and Saturn is it's moving through your sign, and so it's semi-square Venus, and that does say something about your emotional responses, but it's just not going to be as good as usual. So not as effective as usual. So that's something to bear in mind. One final point: Mars is moving into Aries. It does stay in Aries until June the 9th, and so over the next 6 weeks or so, Pisces, maybe money requires quite a lot of your attention, because it's not just that Mars is moving through a sign which, from a Pisces perspective, is often connected with money. It's also the fact that Mars is starting to make a conjunction with the North Node, which is in Aries. And so you have to ask, what is the right thing for Pisceans to be doing? And the right thing for Pisceans to be doing at the moment is to be thinking about their personal finances, to be thinking about how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. And if something is wrong and someone is holding money back from you, or someone is being careless with money, with Mars in Aries, you need to be very clear about it. Tell people straight away. Don't sit on it. Or it may just be an organization. If some organization is messing you around financially, don't just hold back. Be assertive about it. But I'm not talking about today or tomorrow or even the next day. I'm more talking about the broad picture between now and, say, around June the 9th. Over the next couple of days, things are all a bit of a mess because Mars is still conjunct Neptune. Mars is conjunct Skeet. It's just not a great time to be really getting heavily involved with financial stuff. But in a few days' time, and from then until early June, that really is a time to assert yourself in a financial sense. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. And so I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 3, difficulty at the beginning. In fact, it was the only hexagram I got because there were no moving lines. And so when you've got no moving lines, the hexagram is a bit stuck. It doesn't suggest that there's going to be a lot of action. So because it doesn't move into another hexagram, it may indicate that this sort of difficulty at the beginning is a bit of a prolonged process, and it may take a bit of time to work its way through. But straight away, this 3, difficulty at the beginning, in many respects is quite a positive hexagram, even though it doesn't sound great, because it's saying there's a difficulty at the beginning. It doesn't say there's a difficulty at the ending. So we might be involved in a process which is somewhat protracted, and it's not easy and to begin with, because we're not used to it. And so what are you involved with? And if you do run into trouble, don't panic. these may just be teething problems. And also, help is close by. So if you ask for help, you will get it. And of course, we've had this hexagram difficulty at the beginning, I think only a few days ago. And so don't be afraid to get help. And when you're looking at this hexagram, particularly hexagram which is not moving, we need to actually consider the underlying issue. And so we can understand the underlying issue by looking at the nuclear hexagram. The nuclear hexagram means we remove the top and the bottom line, and then we take the fifth line, fourth line, and third line, third, fourth, fifth line as a top trigram, and the second, third, fourth as a bottom trigram. And this gives us a nuclear hexagram, which is talking about the underlying issue. And the underlying issue is this. It's hexagram. It is not, by way of splitting apart, is not hexagram number 3. It's actually, I think it's hexagram number. It's hexagram number 23. In fact, I think I can just change that number. It should be, I think it's hexagram 23. There we go. Sorry about that. Changed it. There, it's hexagram 23, which is splitting apart. And that's the underlying issue, that something is gone wrong. It talks about, the evil people have got supremacy. It's like, or it could be like a piece of furniture where it's the legs have been cut off. Everything is unstable. But this is not what the meaning of what's going on today. That's not what it's about. It's about the underlying problem. And going back to difficulty at the beginning, the reason there is a problem is because perhaps something in the past has just gone wrong. It's fundamentally damaged, and we're trying to address the problem, perhaps using the wrong tools and without getting enough support. But it is only difficulty at the beginning, and there is a clear indication that if we ask for help, we're going to get the help. And if we persevere, then soon enough, things will start working out. But because it's a locked hexagram, it may take a bit of time to resolve it. It's not like going to work out today. And I think this sort of fits in what I've been saying with the astrology. Mars is moving into Aries. Sure, this is a big change. But at the beginning, when Mars goes into Aries, Mars is conjunct Skeet, it's conjunct Neptune, and we've got Aries on the Aries point on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. And in fact, this difficulty at the beginning seems to fit with exactly what I was saying with Mars moving into Aries. It's great, Mars moving into Aries. It means we're a lot of energy. Mars is well placed in Aries, but when it first moves into Aries, when we first make that transition, Neptune is strong. And I think I'm also reminded of what Vita said about Aries on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. And if you go back to what Vita said about Aries on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, general infection, destruction, dissolution, and that takes us back to the splitting apart. Kind of fits perfectly. So perhaps this is just giving the same message of this difficulty at the beginning. We're trying to deal with something. We are going to deal with the problem. It's going to be okay. But short term, there's not much we can do. Just wait for a few days, I think, or maybe not a few days, but just at the beginning, we just have to accept that things are not going to work out very well. But don't worry, this is perhaps an ongoing process, and maybe this is actually looking forward right through until early June, maybe until Mars moves out of Aries into Taurus. So that's perhaps how we should conceive of this issue. But I must emphasize, I don't really like mixing up the astrology and the I Ching, because the I Ching and the astrology, they are independent oracles, but they do seem to be echoing each other, and maybe the astrology is giving us a certain idea about timing. That's the I Ching, and now I want to go back to Mars in Aries and look at a few people who have Mars in Aries. And I also want to consider, what does it mean to have Mars in Aries? So Mars in Aries is good. I mean, that's what we're told, isn't it? Mars rules Aries. So as Mars rules Aries, you'd think that if you've got Mars in Aries, that's great. It means that you're going to be someone who is going to be very fiery. You're able to take the initiative, and nothing will stop you. You're strong, and things work well. But you could argue that Mars is perhaps too strong in Aries. It could burn itself out. We also have to bear in mind that Mars is a male planet. So in a male chart, it is likely to be owned. I have Mars in Taurus. That's my Mars. I'm not going to project it, but that's because I'm male. That's how it works. I have Venus in Cancer. That's a female planet. I might be more likely to project my Venus in Cancer onto perhaps the opposite sex or whatever. And so in a female chart, that Mars in Aries could well be projected. And looking at some of the women, I'm going to look at a couple of women who've got Mars in Aries. I think we get a feel for that. But in a female chart, Mars in Aries might work differently than in a male chart. And Mars in Aries might relate to the men in her life, the men she's attracted to, husbands, fathers, sons, male employers, those kind of people. And by the way, in a female chart, one sort of very simple sort of rule of thumb, I mean, I'm not saying it works all the time, but generally in a daytime female chart, you would look at the sun to get an idea about partners, male partners, perhaps marriage partners. But in a nighttime chart, you would look at Mars. So perhaps Mars is going to be particularly important in a female chart in terms of understanding the partner so a nighttime chart, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not just looking at it from a point of view of relationships, but just the point is that you do have to consider gender when considering what it means to have Mars in Aries. So let's start by looking at some people who have Mars in Aries, and someone who I think perhaps embodies a couple of people who seem to just embody typical Mars in Aries, a straightforward Mars in Aries, Nigel Farage. So if you don't know, Nigel Farage is a British politician, populist politician. He sort of masterminded Brexit, Britain leaving the European Union. He is a very effective communicator. He's an effective orator, and he has his Mars in Aries. Now, it's not a question of whether you like Nigel Farage or not. That's not what it's about. He is a great public speaker, and his initiative in terms of creating his own political party based around leaving the European Union. I mean, there's a United Kingdom Independence Party, for example. He was very effective, and there is his Mars in Aries, and that's all we need to say about it. Okay, you can see that he's got his Nigel Farage has his North Node in Cancer, 5 degrees Cancer, South Node at 5 degrees Capricorn, and his Mars is square his nodal axis. So I suppose a very important part of his destiny is using that Mars. Quite how he uses that Mars is kind of up to him. But if you've been observing Nigel Farage, you would, I think, agree that he's a typical Mars and Aries person. He asserts himself. And also in this chart, what perhaps helps Mars in Aries is the fact that there's no air in Nigel Farage's chart. Nigel Farage does not spend a lot of time sort of analysing things and thinking, well, we could believe in this, we could believe in that, as air might do. Air might have a little bit of self-doubt. No, Nigel Farage says, it is like this. There is no doubt. Britain should leave the European Union. There's not much nuance there. It's just out. It's all very definite. And because Mars in a fire sign, and he's got Sun in Aries as well, and Jupiter in Aries, it's his intuition. He knows that Britain should leave the European Union. The question of whether or not he might be right or wrong is beside the point. He just knows it, and he has absolute certainty. That is Mars in Aries. And if you have got certainty, you become much more effective as a communicator. And that's why having too much air in your chart, if you're like me, with Sun in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, it can just slow you down. It can really make you seem indecisive. But that's why it can be a good thing to have no air in his chart. And I think, with Nigel Farage, Mars in Aries, I think is working very well. Another man who really does seem to embody Mars in Aries is Russell Brand. There's Russell Brand, Mars in Aries, conjunct Jupiter. I mean, Russell Brand, he did have his YouTube channel. He's still got his YouTube channel. I mean, obviously he's got in trouble because of his allegations about how he's treated the certain members of the opposite sex. I don't want to go into the details there, but I suppose that could be one aspect of Mars in Aries. Mars in Aries is a planet of male sexuality, and we shouldn't forget that. And so, Mars is a planet of male sexuality. So if it's Mars in Aries conjunct Jupiter, then that may say something about how he conducts himself in terms of his close relationships and how he perhaps imposes himself on people. That's Mars in Aries. But if you look at his videos, he comes over as someone pretty forceful and someone who seems to be pretty certain of himself. I mean, even though he does have Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini, like me, Sun and Mercury. But I'm afraid I'm not Russell Brand. But he has Mars in Aries, and he has, with those fire signs, he's got Moon in Aries, Mars in Aries, Jupiter in Aries. With all that fire, gives him a certain sense of knowing that this is right. Okay, he might be wrong. That's not the point. The point is he comes over as thinking he knows. And I think that can be a way in which Mars in Aries really is able to work. But I think, though, in general with Russell Brand and Nigel Farage, I would have said they're two men not projecting their Marses, and I suppose they are using their Mars in Aries in a really very effective way. Mars can also be about war. One person with Mars in Aries is Edward Teller. Why is it January the 15th we celebrate Martin Luther King? Why don't we celebrate Edward Teller instead of Martin Luther King? I mean, Edward Teller, he big deal. He did something really important. He invented the hydrogen bomb. And so it's kind of not surprising that, someone who invented the hydrogen bomb is the Teller-Ulam device. And there's his Mars in Aries. Not only did he invent the hydrogen bomb, but he was an enthusiastic advocate of America building up its nuclear arsenal and standing up to Russia. I suppose he had come from Hungary. He had seen Nazism at first hand, he'd seen communism at first hand, and so as an immigrant to America, I suppose he felt that. And yeah, he was an enthusiastic advocate of America's nuclear program. I think he was one of the reasons that Robert Oppenheimer fell from grace. I think that they'd worked together in the Manhattan Project, but I think he wasn't very sympathetic to Oppenheimer's doubts about nuclear weapons, and so yeah, he thought nuclear weapons were a good thing, need to develop them, and they're an important part of America's defense. And yes, he did invent or co-invented the hydrogen bomb with his Teller Ulam device, and yes, he had Mars in Aries. As another person with Mars in Aries, I don't know how this works though, but Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden certainly has Mars in Aries. His Mars in Aries is opposition Uranus. And so if you've got Mars in Aries opposition Uranus, okay, that Mars in Aries, how well is he expressing his Mars in Aries? Now, this may be an example of someone who, for some reason, is not able to effectively express their Mars in Aries. Mars in Aries has a lot of energy. There are lots of things that Mars wants to get involved with. It's a strong Mars. But maybe if Mars isn't given a focus, it can go wrong. That's a possibility. And with Hunter Biden, he's got his Mars opposition Uranus. Okay, that may say something about the car accident that killed his mother and his sister and seriously hurt himself. That's his Mars opposition Uranus. But in his case, that Mars doesn't. It seems to be a bit of a problem, but it's there. Mars needs to be expressed. He's got a lot of energy, and if that energy is not used correctly, if you've got Mars in Aries, you don't have a proper conduit to that Mars in Aries, maybe it can get involved in drugs or whatever he was doing in Ukraine, and trying to assert himself, perhaps trying to get his father in to help in terms of his business enterprises in Ukraine, whatever he was doing. That's Mars in Aries. But I don't think that Hunter Biden is a very good example of Mars in Aries working in a particularly effective way. Mars, we talked about violence, being assertive. I'm going to do what I want. The Marquis de Sade had Mars in Aries. So the Marquis de Sade, the word sadism obviously comes from Marquis de Sade. He in the late 18th century, he was writing these erotic novels. He was a prisoner in the Bastille, and he had Mars conjunct Aries. I think his sadism and his evil supposedly is much exaggerated. And I think perhaps he liked to sort of push his own bad reputation. But the Marquis de Sade, he did have Mars square Saturn. And I suppose here is someone who sadism is, the word sadism is named after him. And I suppose the sadism is particularly related to sexual sadism. But I just don't think he was a complete psychopath. He was mentally ill, but he had Mars square Saturn. That may be a reminder. Mars Aries, and and Mars is square Venus. So perhaps you can see he's got Venus Saturn conjunction, and Venus Saturn is about Venus conjunct Saturn is about relationships. Donald Trump has a Venus has Donald Trump, interesting, also has Venus Saturn conjunction in Cancer. So critics of Donald Trump might be interested in that. It's quite similar there. So Venus Saturn might be about sexual repression, sexuality going in a particular, in a weird way, because Saturn does that. I mean, Saturn, when you mix it with Venus and Mars, things can do a lot of weird stuff. And so yeah, that Mars in Aries square the Venus Saturn conjunction, I think that kind of might be why he wrote what he wrote, and why he got involved in what he did get involved with, and how his name, the Marquis de Sade, he became famous because he was what sadism was named after. So that's a Marquis de Sade. I think that Mars in Aries kind of working, and it's a strong Mars in Aries. So you could say, in some ways, he was effective. He was able to assert himself, certainly through his writing. But that's how he used his Mars in Aries. It had to be expressed, and so he expressed it in a Venus-Saturn kind of way. So I've been looking at a few men, extreme cases, I suppose, and I'm going to look at a few women who have Mars in Aries. And again, these are perhaps extreme cases. One man which I shouldn't forget about is Gonzalo Lira. Gonzalo Lira was a vlogger, he was a filmmaker, he went to Ukraine, he reported from Kharkov. His videos were very anti-Ukrainian and pro-Russian. I don't know why the Ukrainians didn't just deport him, but they didn't deport him. He got arrested and he died in prison. So people go on and on about Navalny dying in a Russian prison, but people don't seem to talk about Gonzalo Lira, who's an American citizen, born in California. The American government didn't lift a finger to get him out of Ukraine. So he has Mars in Aries. He likes to do what he wants. If he wants to, Mars in Aries, if I want to stay in Kharkov and vlog criticizing a Ukrainian regime, well, that's just what I'm going to do. I don't care. I mean, okay, I understand he had, I think, a partner and maybe children in Ukraine, and there was a strong reason why he stayed in Ukraine. But still, Mars in Aries, I'm going to do what I like. I don't care. But that Mars is conjunct Saturn. And so that Mars-Saturn conjunction, maybe it's that crazy belligerence and assertiveness and stubbornness. I'm going to do what I want. I don't care. And maybe that's what killed him. But we shouldn't forget it was really the Ukrainians that killed him by neglect. But still, I think what he did was pretty foolhardy. So turning to a few women with Mars in Aries. Now remember, I'm just going to be looking at some extreme cases here. There was that, what do they call, a cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins. She was the one who was shot by, hold on, let's get this right. So Alec Baldwin was making this film, and was it called Rust? That's right. And he thought it was a blank, and he fired this gun, and it had a round in it, and he shot Halyna Hutchins, and she died. And Halyna Hutchins has the Sun in Aries and Mars in Aries. Now that might just be one way of looking at it. Okay, you could say Sun in Aries, Mars in Aries. Here is a very assertive woman, obviously successful in her career. She was a immigrant from Ukraine. She did well. She was on made lots of films. So she was really very successful. She was able to push herself, and I assume she had plenty of talent. So Sun, Mars in Aries was working well for her. But maybe when a woman has Mars in Aries, perhaps Sun in Aries as well, she might be attracting difficult events, perhaps literally getting shot. And here is, because that's talking about maybe the men she's attracting. The kind of man that would accidentally have a gun and pull the trigger and shoot her. And if you look at Alec Baldwin's chart, he actually was an Aries. Okay, his sun in Aries. We don't know what time he's born, but so forget the houses. So his sun was at 13 Aries. So his sun was okay. I suppose it was relatively close to her sun. So maybe that sun in Aries and the Mars in Aries as well. She was picking up on that, and so that is a really unfortunate way it can work in a female chart, because if it was a man who had Mars in Aries, it would be his Aries. But with Halyna Hutchins, she's projecting on that, and unfortunately in this case that projection was met by Alec Baldwin. Someone else who had Mars in Aries was Joan Vollmer. You've probably not heard of Joan Vollmer. I wouldn't really have heard of Joan Vollmer. So she had Mars in Aries, and she had a pretty similar fate to Halyna Hutchins. So she was married, I think, to Bill Burroughs, and in the early 50s in Mexico City, William Burroughs decided to do the William Tell routine, in which I think that Joan Vollmer put a glass on her head, and William Burroughs tried to shoot the glass from off her head, and instead killed her and shot her in the head. Now, and she died, I think. Yes, she definitely died. Somehow William Burroughs managed to escape a murder charge, or managed to pay someone to get out of Mexico, because it happened in Mexico City. But it's just, the point is, she had Mars in Aries, and actually Mars opposition Saturn in Aries. So in her case, Mars gets projected onto a man, or a man with a gun. Mars in Aries, that's a symbol, man with a gun. Likewise with Halyna Hutchins, a projection is on the man with the gun. And I'm wondering if in the case of Joan Vollmer and Halyna Hutchins, we see what happened with their Mars in Aries. Their Mars got projected onto a man with a gun who killed them. And so maybe that Mars wasn't fully integrated into their life. So if you're a woman with Mars in Aries, it's just perhaps important to work out who you're projecting that Mars onto, and is it properly integrated into your life? Because if it's not properly integrated, maybe you're attracting weird events like being associated with men who in the end shoot you. So that's Joan Vollmer. And I'm sorry to continue on this theme, but Monica Lewinsky had Mars in Aries. I think that's an accurate time for her. So again, projection. Mars in Aries. Back in Monica Lewinsky's point of view, Mars in Aries is a strong Mars. It's a strong man. And she's got Mars opposition Uranus right across her ascendant and descendant. So in her case, that Mars in Aries is the president, was President Clinton. It got to be. And so she's not living out her own Mars, she's projecting it, and it's a strong angular Mars. So yes, so she projects it onto Bill Clinton, and I think that's fairly straightforward, and it is opposition Uranus. Mars is square Mercury. I'll leave it to you to work out what that might mean. Okay, so finally, I suppose I should finish with one final woman who's got Mars in Aries, who, as far as I know, is not projecting her Mars to any great extent, and that is Tulsi Gabbard. So Tulsi Gabbard is, she was a former congresswoman, wasn't she? She was a Democrat, and she fell out with the Democrats, and she's I don't know. I think she sort of is kind of more inclined towards Trump at the moment. In fact, I think she's been suggested as a possible vice presidential pick for Trump. And she has Mars in Aries conjunct the Sun. So from what I know about Tulsi Gabbard, she is not falling into the kind of trap that Joan Vollmer or Halyna Hutchins or Monica Lewinsky is falling into. I don't know about her private life, but she comes over as being an assertive, independent-minded woman. I'm not saying I support her or don't support her. I don't really know much about her, but she's got a high profile in media. I think Fox News like to interview her a lot, and she seems to be very independent-minded, and that might be a positive aspect of having Mars in Aries. And just because it's in a female chart doesn't mean it always has to be projected or has to be manifested as some external event. So maybe she is in complete control of her Mars. And yeah, she doesn't like to be pushed around, and she doesn't like to just do what she's told and follow the party line. So maybe Tulsi Gabbard is an example of a woman whose Mars in Aries is working well. I would like to go on more about Mars in Aries, but I've run out of time. I don't think I can carry on for any longer. So thank you very much for listening to me. I know I've gone on for too long, and sorry about the selection of charts. It is an extreme selection of charts, but I just wanted to get a general idea of what Mars in Aries might be about. And I think there is a hint that women with Mars in Aries have to be really careful to take ownership of that Mars in Aries. Now, maybe Monica Lewinsky now has taken ownership of her Mars in Aries, but with Halyna Hutchins and Joan Vollmer, well, they didn't get a chance, did they? Well, they probably did, but I don't know. In both their cases, it ended up with them getting shot. So women with Mars in Aries do have to be careful, and I think ownership, they have to be careful that they take full ownership of their Mars, and be careful about how they project it, because that projection can lead to difficulties. So yes, so thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you found that interesting. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you like the video, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Thanks very much again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.